Okay, so this is one of those videos where I just feel myself like ranting on to myself, and I'm like, I should just be recording this. So I just wanted to talk about again the importance of the four directions and magical work when it comes to actually banishment and protection. You know, a lot of people probably that's probably the most common thing I get asked is like, how do I protect myself? How do I banish? How do I get rid of all this stuff around me? And for whatever reason, I've been going. I haven't had an easy time lately, like myself, and that's why I'm doing some of this astrology, this personal shamanic based astrology in a Taoist, shamanic Taoist. It's hard to describe all that stuff at one time. In a shamanic way, path working kind of way, because I've so frequently found myself unable to deal with the psychic forces that I can feel around me. And when you expand and expand and expand, you do these things, and you're doing all these practices, and you're getting, more attuned to different things, and doing more energy work and polishing up your system. It's like you start to reach a point, and it just gets like uncomfortable, and then you integrate that, and it gets more comfortable, and blah blah blah. Um, but I found myself really strained most of the time lately to actually integrate the energies that I'm experiencing around me and the extra information that's coming in. I sort of feel like like an extra layer of psychic responsibility in a way, because when you're aware of it, then it comes into your awareness, then you're supposed to do something about it, right? So anyway, I find that the only way that I've been able to combat this in my own particular idiom is with the four directions work. And it was so vague to me, I think, at first when I started working with this kind of stuff. Four directions, who cares? Like, what does this actually have to do with my spirit, with my personality, with my uh, magical self or divine self or enlightenment or anything like that? Um, Strangely enough, I think it has to do a lot with it. These are the types of things that we don't fully understand until we start to actually do them. And when you do align yourself to the actual directions, you're like, oh my God, I'm just a sensitive instrument, and there are all of these weird energies going through the earth and the atmosphere and all this stuff, and it all actually exists, you know. Um, I would one day, if I was like really, really attuned and I just been practicing all day, I might like offer myself up for an experiment, like blindfold me and see if I could find which direction was which just by the energy that you feel. That would be fun. I've tried it before and I think I was vaguely successful. I can't remember. Anyway, so the only thing I've found that keeps things in check is this. And I think well, before I get there, what does it have to do with anything? It's basically I'm taking the Taoist model, and I've explained it to you guys before. And the Taoist model is basically the four directions, and each of the directions has an element associated with it. Each of the directions has a gua associated with it, a trigram from the I Ching. Each direction has. I did a workshop on this using this kind of stuff, and it was light language based, and I would call each of those directions and each of those quadrants within all the participants, and then I would start using the Akadua to like clear that space out for everybody, and it was really powerful. It was really good. I had good results with it, and people really liked it. And it's strange to me, like I got different comments like from my sister. She's like, I had really a difficult time with this one, and then this one felt really good, and this one was easy. And it was really interesting to me that people could so easily distinguish the different types of energies that were occurring while I was doing this work. I was just like channeling it in to the group thing through this grid essentially, and people were experiencing that stuff, moving out, opening up, expanding, whatever it was, becoming more aware of that stuff because of that extra energy, the Akadua, and then able to hopefully integrate something into their own systems better, or more strongly, or whatever. So, yeah, and so then each of the directions is associated with a sort of part of your life. And this is where the Bagua gets more. You'll see that map and it's different colors, and sometimes it's just a square grid of 9. And it's basically wealth and prosperity, fame, friends and family, and all these different aspects of your sort of mundane life. It's important, like even working with the tarot or something like that. And obviously, this comes from feng shui. It's like how you're supposed to lay things out according to the bagua, and every room has its own. It's like a microcosm of different baguas in your different house. Um, but it's almost like a mundane level of experience that the feng shui stuff is talking about. Makes sense because that's supposed to be practical for your life in general. And everybody knows that when you do have a clear and consciously laid out space, your consciousness is much cleaner, much brighter, much more pure, much easier to, you know, yeah. You don't want to meditate in a garbage dump. I mean, you do just to like mix it up and like see what the difference is, or it's like ascetics meditating in a graveyard or something like that. Not the most ideal conditions for enlightenment, one would think, and yet you have to go to those different extremes. Anyway, I'm just rambling. Um, so I think that my first introduction to the sort of four directions was probably just in the Western magical sense, and you're doing like the banishing ritual of the pentagram. And so you face east, and you draw the thing, and you say the thing. And then you turn the other direction, and you draw the thing, and you say the thing. Um, I just want to get down to like how you actually use this. You don't even have to change directions because your relation to those directions, and it's not just the four directions too, but the sub directions as well. So there's actually 8. This is like a full grid intersecting your body. This is sacred geometry that we're talking about, and so your relation. You can shrink down and think of it inside of you and these different eightfold things, or even 9, or you can expand it out into the world around you and think of it that way. This is the expanded version. When you have all of those forces in check, because you acknowledge those forces and you sort of like merge with them and you become one with them in a way. To me, it's not like, I'm putting this shield up against the west and the onslaught of the forces that are coming into this realm of my, or this aspect of my consciousness. Even though that's how it feels sometimes when stuff starts to overwhelm you. You're like, oh my god, I'm being attacked. I hear that a lot. I'm being attacked by things. I don't think they're actually being attacked. Why do we have to? I know it feels like that sometimes, and there are such things as attacks. I get that. But I think that when you find this balance and this power, and every aspect of your being is sort of covered by these different angles, these different lines of energy that come through you, then you just feel so whole, you know? And then it doesn't feel like anything is eating at you, or picking at you, or stealing your energy, or pulling you down, or making you too manic for crazy reasons, like I'm sort of feeling lately. It's summer. Wah! Fire. Um, yeah. So, in the original sense, it was just like you would face a direction, chant a name. Usually in the Western one, it's like the names of God or something. I don't really care about that. And then you would do a pentagram symbol because that represents the 5 elements and everything coming together and the magicalness and whatever. It's a very earthy symbol, and you can even hook it up to the Taoist stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be Western, the pentagram. The pentagram also represents the 5 elements in the Chinese sense, but those elements are like different forms and phases of qi moving into each other, which is what I usually use the pentagram for anyway. I don't think of the classical Western magical elements, fire, water, air. There's no air in the Chinese one, it's metal, but metal also means air or wind. Like, that's how fluid and subjective these things are to the Taoists. I think that's kind of amazing. So the original way, again, is just moving different directions and saying the names. What I really wanted to do is like my own version of it, like um, change subjects, is basically using light language to connect to each of the spirits of the directions. So after you have an elemental association, you have the trigram association, which sometimes matches up sort of with the elements. Um, you have a color association, at least in the Taoist one. You could use the Native American one, and it's different colors and different animals. There is an animal association, so west is tiger, and north is like turtle, warrior man. Sometimes it's one or the other, sometimes it's a combination of both. East is some kind of dragon or something. Or sometimes it's a yellow horse. Yeah. But it's like the animal doesn't matter if you feel like I use a fox, a fairy fox, because I'm cool like that. And this phoenix is in the and then sometimes it just calls it like a red pheasant. But it could be phoenix, it could be whatever you want. But just connect to those energies and then personify them. Then I like to put a guiding spirit, which is like a higher consciousness that represents the same things, the elements. It represents the animal, but the animal is a different type of consciousness. It's more, it's more expansive and wild and that kind of stuff. And then this guiding, like higher consciousness, is more like the consciousness of a bodhisattva. And you have each of the directions, the 8 directions, in association with an immortal being. So these are the you could think angels, the divine beings of the Taoists in a certain sense. It's so funny because Taoists like don't worship any particular gods, but they do venerate a lot of interesting and cool spirits and call upon them just like you would call upon saints and things like that. And it's just like it's not focused the way other, especially monotheistic religions are. Yeah. So that's exactly what I've been doing in this sense, except that I will, as soon as I start to connect to the direction itself, and especially to the animal consciousness of that direction, then I start to speak light language. I really decided that mostly the light language is like a response to connecting to an energy that is higher than what I'm vibing at that moment. And then after speaking it and after connecting that way and you could do this with a prescribed mantra as well, as long as you really let your mind go into the connection of the mantra and the object that the mantra is evoking forward, like an animal spirit or the immortal of this direction and the energies of the direction itself, all of that stuff together. What I was doing was I was picking different bowl combinations, so my singing bowls. So I basically make a chord spontaneously from 5 or 6 of them that I have up there, and then that would be the chord for fire and the south and the phoenix and the immortal that rides that phoenix. Um, and then I would integrate that into my little ritual. So I would do the thing, get into a meditative space. That chord means that direction and all of those associations. And then I would allow myself to connect to them further with light language. And then it just becomes like this big old. It's hard to describe. Um, the light language thing is really interesting, and it has a lot more to do with actually connecting to the energies than it does necessarily I'm going to open myself up completely and let this energy come through. It's the same thing though, it's just the me, it's like me as a channel, my intention to what that stuff is for. If I just let it come through, then it's not necessarily coming from any being. It is just connecting me to that thing with this weird stream of glossolalia. Um, and then it reaches a certain point and it stops, and then I just go into boom or whatever mode that comes out, whether it's just ohm or something else, and that goes on for a while. I might do the bowls again. This is my own version, and I'll probably put it on video or something, because I'm sure it'll be pretty interesting. Although you have seen that kind of stuff before, me do that kind of stuff before, and it's strange because I used to be a little wary of ritual in general, Um, but I found that when you do it with the right intention, that's the point. The intention is the ritual. The ritual is the intention. You just have to do the ritual with intention. Otherwise, you're just doing nothing. It's all the way back to the Vedas, or I think it might be the Upanishads, start making fun of the Vedics because they were chanting so much, and they start like comparing them to dogs basically that don't know the reason. They're just repeating the stuff. They're just afraid to let go, and so these like people are clinging on to their mantras, these empty mantras, because they don't realize that the actual point of mantra work is the intention behind it and what you're doing inside while you're doing that mantra. And you can do a mantra completely internally without ever uttering a sound. And these people, in the eyes of these other scholars or writers or sages at the time, considered them to just be idiots because they were just repeating things ad nauseum and it didn't mean anything, you know. So the point of all of that, and the point of light language, is the actual connection. And you do light language. You're allowed to open yourself up to that. You find that your stuff is going all over the place. Your intention should be there, and when it is, stuff just flows through you naturally. And your intention should sort of lock you to that thing, to that object of concentration. It's a meditative technique. So there are other people like shamans and like mediums especially in like the Taoist tradition, and maybe even like the Bonpo shamans and stuff like that. They will speak this crazy stuff, or they'll speak the sutra or spell mantra, whatever it is, whether it's in special strange language or there's a dog outside. Special strange language, or something already prescribed, or just glossolalia. And they will do that until they are possessed by the spirit of the departed one, or by a different kind of spirit. And so I'm just throwing it out there, that like I think there's something more to light language than there is, or even just to the language part of it, so that we're actually connecting to something with our voice. And again, at part of it, I will just go into toning, and when I'm doing that toning, I really feel like I am vibrating with the object of my intention, whether it's a physical object or a spiritual object or just a mental thing, in my head. It's my intention. You're vibing with it. That's the point. So that's what I've been doing with each of the directions. Again, you don't actually have to face the different directions. I was just doing it mine, sitting down, facing northwest, because that's the way my altar faces. One thing I want to add is that whether you do it in those directions or not, one thing that I think is very important is to recenter yourself and to sort of pull all of those energies into you. So let's say I have faced every single direction, and I'll just end on the last one. I'm standing, let's say, and I've got a mudra, and I'm just doing my intention, and I connect to that thing. I do the light language, and it's great, and I'm banging my bowls, and I really feel that stuff, and then I'm finished the entire thing. I'm gonna take in a different mudra, a more like receptive position, and I'm gonna like become a vacuum or a sponge. I'm gonna let all those energies come into my body, swirl into my body as like slowly and relaxedly as possible. I might do it in a more focused way, as in I'll pull them into a certain chakra or something like that. And then once you've done that, you can recenter everything. I always like to bring it back down to the lower dantian because Taoism is good, and then you can end that way. So you're pulling all this energy in, however you do it. In some Taoist conceptions, then the sides of the waist right here have very open little apertures of energy, and you can really pull energy in there and bring it around this meridian and into the lower dantian and store it there and store it there and store it there, which is where you always store your energy when you start and stop anything. Okay, so what's the benefits of this practice? I mean, I hope that was enough to describe the practice. You're connecting to things with toning, whether it's light language or chant or spell or whatever. Sound is very important to me. You're trying to vibe with that thing. The important thing is connecting energetically to the source, whether that source is a directional source or whatever. And then you might have all these other associations that you want to personally make your own little map of, and that's great. Then these particular energies you can pull in. If you want to do a visualization, you can imagine the beautiful white silver energy coming from the west, swirling into your stomach or into your heart area. You can imagine the beautiful gold and yellow coming from the east and swirling into the same, and basically just like a rainbow swirling around you of all these beautiful, vibrant chi colors, and then converging into one place. And the center of the work, I guess, the point of it is Earth in this system. And Earth represents all of the elements combined. And so that's another concept, that it's this mixing, this alchemical stuff. So you're taking all of these different things all the way across the directions, or maybe you're using the bagua like me, and then you mix them together in the center of it, which is you. So I place myself as the golden dragon in the center, and then I, suck up all these energies, and then the golden dragon in my visualization condenses them into a pearl of light, and then I can move that pearl, which is also like a perfected level of your consciousness, but it's also a healing pearl or pill that you're condensing from these different energies that you've now opened yourself up to and purified and made workable. This is energy medicine, personal energy medicine. You can take that pearl, you can put it anywhere that you think needs more healing and just let it do its thing. Or you can just condense it down into the lower dantian, and it will naturally do its thing by seeping into your system slowly. It's a bunch of Taoist stuff and a bunch of clearing out the directions, working with the directions, the different associations you might want to have with the directions. I use the Akadua when I'm doing this, and I don't particularly direct any type of Akadua to any particular direction. I could, and I think I drew a map of what each one was to me or something. I don't remember. But I'm just like, I'm offering these things. I'm offering my own consciousness wakes up the consciousness of these divine beings, and my own consciousness wakes up the consciousness of this animal consciousness, which is a little more primal, a little more expansive, and really gives you a sense of majesty and power. And the immortal or the spirit or the deity or whatever that you want to associate with that. These are just different levels of experience that you can use all within this format. That's all I'm trying to give you ideas, I think it's good to craft your own. You can use personal associations. You can use different crystals and different colors for the different directions if you really want to. Whatever you feel coming from them is what you should do. But I think it's so important. And then condensing those energies down and really closing down that way is so important. And then when you find yourself in that state, then you just kind of like, whatever comes up in your everyday life, you're like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. It really does give you another shield. And that's why I try to get people away from the idea of making shields because they're defending the defense. Oh my gosh, banish, banish, banish. Banishing is great. Banishing is just a form of cleansing. You need to be able to let stuff go when you're really banishing, getting rid of it all. I'm totally into banishing. It's also cleansing, and that's what I do, and it's different. When I'm really feeling like the onslaught of stuff, it is, you got to go internally, and you got to really start from the inside and really build up your energy inside, and then you can connect to these different areas. You can cleanse them. You can chant your own particular mantra, just one for all 8 directions. You don't have to change it up. It doesn't have to be special. You don't have to remember the exact associations. I don't remember the names of the immortals that are associated with the directions or whatever, but I call on them anyway with my intention, and their energy comes through perfectly, right? And then when you get to that point, there's nothing that needs to be shielded, that you need to shield yourself from when you get to that point. It's like, no, I can handle it. Okay, so I just wanted to share that again because I really think it's the supremo of actually protecting yourself against this stuff. Is you can't just create barriers because that just invites more weirdness.